So you've got axioms and you've got theorem. Now if you look at, for example, axioms, some of them depend upon theorem, and theorem, some of them depend upon axioms. Axioms are divided in logic into two different types. You've got logical and non-logical axioms. Non-logical axioms are axioms which are, quote-unquote, self-evident. In other words, they have no way to be proven in and of themselves. They can only be self-evident. Do you get what I mean? Therefore, if we're being completely honest about mathematics, and this is probably could be seen to be kind of like a postmodernist philosophical criticism of mathematics, is although both of you have accepted that mathematics, and I accept as well that mathematics is a good enough truth standard, there still remains a hint of speculation, which is that you accept that the axiom, which is non-logical, is in fact self-evident. Do you understand where I'm coming from? So what I'm saying here is mathematics, like science, although it gives us really good results, fantastic results, which we don't want to dispute, it couldn't possibly give you 100% absolute certain results unless you take as a presupposition or as an assumption that those axioms that we're talking about are self-evident.
I think they can prove themselves, can't they, by practical experiment. So, for example, in chemistry, you can say that if I combine that element with that element, it's going to have that result. And you prove it by actually carrying out the practical.
This is a good point, and I'll tell you what the problem with that point is. Pardon? It's a very good point. But I'll tell you something about scientific inquiry. Scientific inquiry, okay, the like of which you've just mentioned now, as is mentioned in Thomas Kuhn's book, the structures of scientific revolution. What happens with scientific facts, not even theory, what happens with scientific facts is that they undergo change from time to time, as Thomas Kuhn references in Structures of Scientific Revolution. And this has happened many, many times in physics, for example, in the last 200 years. This is very well known, yeah? Now, you're saying that you can do certain experiments in certain ways. What happens, practically speaking, is when science is done. Although science, by the way, I'm not knocking science, I'm just saying that everything can be criticized, including science. So, when science is done in a controlled environment that you've mentioned, that goes usually in some kind of peer-reviewed journal. Another scientist comes along and then they try and falsify it in their own controlled conditions through laboratory experiments. Now, I'm not going to say more often than not, but a lot of the time, as is measured by those who do like scientific metric studies, they find that those particular scientific facts can be disproven. Do you see what I mean? And that's happened many, many times in the last 100 years, even in the last 100 years. So you're saying that you depend upon science as basically as a truth standard. I say to you, we can criticize that. If you're saying you depend upon maths as a true standard, I say to you, we can criticize that. And that's what the postmodernist philosophical branch has been able to do. So I say to you today, I think we'd all agree, instead of saying something can be proven 100% as a matter of philosophical truth, what we tend to do as human beings, and we use a probabilistic type of reasoning, don't we? So we say this is probably the case because of X, Y, and Z. The evidence is overwhelming, or the evidence is very strong, and we accept mathematics. We accept -2 times -2 equals 4. Although we say in the beginning that -2 times -2 equals 4 is based on some non-logical axiom, which is self-evident and can't be proven. As we know as well with science, it can be disproven in the future, as has happened many times. Now here's the point.
Some things do go beyond proof. So, for example, if I had a match,
yes,
my little piece of paper is going to go on fire. If you think I like that match and put it on paper, is it going to go on fire? You're wrong. If I put a match on there, do you think it's going to go on fire?
I agree with that point, because what you're saying, yes, what you're saying is that there are some parts of science which are less speculative and less subjective than other parts.
No, they're not speculative, they're right.
I say to you one thing, that science itself shouldn't be, we shouldn't generalize it, because there are parts of science, like for example the shape of the earth. It's very difficult that we're going to, I mean some people, there is a flat earth society, but it's very difficult that we're going to find out in 200 years time that the earth is actually flat and we were all wrong for all along. Do you know what I mean? So that's, I would say, one of the least speculative kind of things in science, where you can actually observe things using your empirical, your 5 senses, and then come to a conclusion about it. But when it comes to physics, for example, like the whole thing with macro or classical physics and micro quantum mechanics, there's an issue here because there are paradoxes between the two things. And physicists are saying that they expect some kind of unification theory to come in the future. And if this unification theory comes, then we can expect physics to change again. You see what I mean?
See, I think physics, though, and science, I'm not a physicist and I hate science at school, but the only things that are left to debate in science are things that haven't yet been proven. So the only things that actually scientists carry on debating and carry on discovering and carrying on progressing are things that haven't yet been proven. So the matched piece of paper example, there's no point discussing it anymore.
The thing is, the point is, really we don't, when it comes to science, it's a bit of a circular argument to say that we can prove those things which haven't been proven.
They're the only things that carry on being debated.
No, there are things that carry on being debated, which are part of...
So people still carry on debating whether I've got a match on a piece of paper, it's worth debating still.
Well, I mean, look, as I said to you before, there are less and more subjective or speculative points, and I've agreed with you on that. But the point really is that if we look at science holistically, there are parts of science, do you see what I mean? Now, having said that, here's my point, right?
Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude.
No, it's okay. No, sorry about this. But it's a good way to introduce it, yeah? My thesis is as follows, yeah? And you're going to be surprised. It's going to sound ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
This man's going to laugh. And, you know, you might find, you know, I might feel like this guy. But this is my thesis, right?
Okay.
My thesis today is that basically, as a Muslim, you asked why basically am I Muslim, right? We've criticized science, we've criticized and scrutinized mathematics even, yeah? We've seen how those things depend on some kind of presuppositions. And that the truth that comes out of it couldn't be 100%. Okay? My point to you is today that I believe that the Quranic method for verification is stronger than scientific method.
And the Quranic method is that what we so called?
So I'm going to tell you...
Are the scientific
No, forget this, man. I'm going to tell you something today which I think is more refreshing than that. Okay? My thesis is that the Quranic method of verification is much stronger, and I say much, to add hyperbole, than the scientific method itself. So as we know, the scientific method, there's different kinds of phases of the scientific method, yeah? So there is, the hypothesis, then the experiment, then the falsification phase. The Quranic way of verification is divided into 3 different parts. The first part is what you call the falsification part. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says in chapter 4 verse 82, He says, if this book was from other than God, they would have found within it many contradictions. Now you might think, okay, this is a very subjective endeavor, trying to find contradictions. It might be a contradiction in one place, but someone else might not see it as a contradiction. You see what I mean? Contradictions are part of logic as a philosophical discipline. Bertrand Russell, who was a philosopher, an atheist philosopher, he categorized logic and mathematics as coming or belonging to the same family. He saw no difference between them. So, finding a contradiction in the Quran is a valid logical recourse. So that's number one. And it's quite similar, so far we're saying it's quite similar to the scientific method. In so much as the scientific method asks you to falsify a certain scientific fact before it then becomes not part of the scientific discourse. And the Quranic discourse is telling you to falsify the Quran in order for it not to be disproven basically as a book of
So everything's right until it's proven wrong?
Well, not everything is right until proven wrong. In specific circumstances, you need to be able to disprove it. And that's the whole point of the informal fallacy of finding a contradiction.
So that's the first part.
That's the first part.
Well, I don't accept the second, third part.
Yes.
But okay,
So far,
it could still be a book of gibberish that doesn't contradict itself.
Yeah.
So what's the second part?
The second part is the inimitability challenge. Now, people have heard this before, okay, but I'm going to give you a different way of looking at it. You and I today, when we were talking about mathematics, I said, why does -2 times -2 equals +4? So you said, really, I trust the mathematicians, yeah? I say to you, the inimitability challenge, in the second chapter of the Quran, God says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُمْ. It gets it in my head so I can just translate word for word. So it says, and if you are in doubt of what we have revealed to our slave, i.e. the Prophet Muhammad, then bring a chapter like it and bring your witnesses from other than God if you are truthful. Now, one of the commentators, which is one of the main, his name is Mujahid, of the Quran says that this means to say that bring the specialists of the field of linguistics, Arabic linguistics in particular, to see if there's anything that can match the Quranic discourse in terms of its prose and its structure and its this and that and the other. And if this was to be done, it would have been done in the first generation. But you might say that once again, it requires a subjective or massive subjective element. But I would say the same thing, and reliance on the witness testimony. I would say the same thing is the case with mathematicians. I mean, mathematics is really a language. Okay, mathematics is a language, if you think about it. In that case, trying to find or trying to create mathematics of some sort and trying to create or imitate or recreate language is quite a similar thing to do. Point 3, and this is probably the most impressive part. I say the evidence base of Islam, which in Islam is referred to as ayat. Every verse is called an ayat in the Quran. Now, yeah, a piece of evidence. Yeah, really.
What makes it evidence?
I'll tell you why. I'm going to compartmentalize this into 3 different parts. The first part is the predictions of the future. Predictions of the
Are these
future.
the scientific?
No. Predictions of the future. Yes, so I'll give you just one example, but I can tell you for a fact that within the Islamic discourse, I can quote to you, if you give me the time, but I don't want to waste your time, I can give you no less than 50 different predictions. Right? I can give you no less than 50 different predictions. I'll give you 1 or 2, right? The Quranic one, chapter number 30 of the Quran, verses 1 to 6. It says, غُلِبَتِ الرُّومُ Alif Lam Mim, غُلِبَتِ الرُّومُ, that the Romans have been defeated. وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبٍ سَيَغْلِبُونَ, and they will be, after their loss, they will be victorious. في بضع سنين, in 3 to 9 years. لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد, for God is the affair before it and after it. ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون, and that day the Muslims will be rejoicing. Yeah. So and it continues. So basically, what is it saying? It's saying that, and this is making a very risky, daring prediction. And there's so many of them in the Quran, but this is just one of them, which is very specific, which is why I'm using it. It's saying that in 6 to 9 years that the Romans will beat the Persians, and this is recorded in history as the the Sassanid, Persian, the Sassanid Byzantine wars. These Sassanid Byzantine wars show us through the historical record that it was in fact the case that the Romans were defeated at one stage. After that, they had been defeated and they were on the brink of collapse. That exactly 8 years later that they defeated the Persian Empire. Now, had this been wrong, probabilistically, you can actually put this into a probability generator. Probability theory is a mathematical theory. You can say, from a probability perspective, to what extent could this be probabilistically accurate? And we know from maths that because probability theory usually depends on like an event and a sample space, that you can actually put this into a generator and you will get a result which is incredibly low for this particular prophecy. So if you add them all up, the probability becomes lesser and lesser when we add up all the prophecies together. Now, why is this stronger than the scientific method just as by itself? Because we say the scientific method, we don't know what's going to happen with, for example, physics, especially complex scientific facts when it comes to physics.
Can I just compare your last method to something called concrete, these pop psychologists or mind readers like to do? These people have TV shows, they'll say vague things, a voice, name begins with M, he's dead or something, then someone goes, oh, my Michael just died, he was my husband. And they pretend to mind read this way.
I'm happy that
and it sounds fairly convincing. I think it's similar to that. I mean, the Roman Parthian wars were pretty cyclical, they weren't going back and forth. So making a prediction like they will lose and win again can easily turn out to be true.
Well, actually, if you look at all of the variables, this is the thing. Probability theory, and we're talking mathematically, it depends upon variables, right? So if you look at the variables, the Quran says that the Romans will beat the Persians. That will be done in a nearby land. And the word Adna has 2 meanings. Adna fi Adna al-Ard. Adna al-Ard means nearby land and a low land. And by the way, geologists have found out that where the battle has taken place, which is in the banks of the Dead Sea, is geologically the lowest part of the Earth. Some have said that, I haven't confirmed this. I'm waiting on the testimony of something. Having said this, really, the third part of evidence is the time period is mentioned. So it's giving specific details from 3 to 9 years. This 3 to 9 years, bid'a sinin, in Arabic means 3 to 9. Having said that, we put a 4th variable in, which is that the Muslims will be happy for that for some reason. Why? These are 2 disbelieving people fighting each other. What have they got to do with it? Because on that day, they had also been victorious against an intruding enemy. So there was a reason for them to be happy. When you put all of those things together, in this one particular example, it becomes quite difficult to ascribe it to some kind of guesswork. And you have to ask yourself the opposite thing as well. What if someone had said this thing and it turned out to be incorrect? that would have dramatic effects on the one who's claiming to be a prophet. And this is
And
just one
therefore,
of
maybe his prediction didn't make sense to the whole text. So if someone makes a prediction that turns out to be wrong, okay, let's not put that in.
well, I mean,
And therefore, you end up with 50 or whatever correct predictions.
you've got to ask yourself.
You've only chosen the
That's a question.
Do you think that could have happened?
No, because I'll tell you why that has not happened. Because now we have to talk about, which is a separate topic, the preservation of the Quran. Has the Quran been preserved fully from the time of the Prophet till now? And these are questions that we can ask historians and those people who have radiocarbon dated the copies of the Quran that are available, for example, in Sana'a.
So I went off and did history, because I enjoy
Which is radiocarbon dated to 99.9% accuracy. It's some say 80 to 90. But this is a very high
He does it so
degree of accuracy.
confidently. He introduces all this spurious mathematical nonsense.
The same the Quran that we have today is the same one that they had back then.
Yes, I love that.
Then you can actually use
We have a case of the
evidences.
the President-elect of the United States
We
is
say
the
another
current.
We say that if we add up all of these different
occurred to me
predictions
the other
together,
day.
what makes it stronger than the scientific method? Because as we say, the scientific method depends upon some people to come in the future and
If they named the
falsify it.
President Kruger, the
Get
VP
it?
done it.
So we have some certain facts now in physics which can be falsified in the future. We don't know for a fact. You can't stand up and say that this fact of science and physics and quantum mechanics is definitely going to stay as it is for the rest of my lifetime and your children's life.
Do you know?
However, what I can say, looking, because I have the retrospective advantage, I can say that the Romans were defeated and that's that. Therefore, that's not going to change. Therefore,
No,
my evidence is
13,
stronger than the
13.
scientific evidence.
One, I think. Yeah, 13.
What you're doing though, which is interesting, is you're treating the scientific method like it's some sort of dictated method. I think it's more of a sort of a method that's arisen from common sense and logic. So is it not better, therefore, to, I don't know how to say this, but judge yourself and do this by a sensible method rather than a method that's being dictated to you by a religious text and religious faith?
Well, as I said to you,
Why do you discount the scientific method? Why
I
do
don't
you do
discount
that?
it. I like it.
Right, okay. So why are you pitching it against the so-called Quranic method?
I'm not. I'm just.
You're saying the Quranic method is better than the scientific method,
Yes, I ascertained in the beginning.
but it's based on one book, whereas the scientific method is not based on anything in particular.
I ascertained in the beginning. What is your standard of truth? And you said mathematics.
You said mathematics is a standard of truth. I agree with it. It is a standard of truth.
Okay, and you said
just
scientific
assume
science is not science. And then therefore, now I've said to you
He's doing.
how principally we find out facts in maths and science, and principally how we find out facts with the Quran. And I've showed you that actually there is a superiority in the way that the
Quranic method as opposed to the scientific.
That's what I've done.
Well, I disagree with that because it's based on one book.
So-
Whereas the scientific method, it's not one path that you have to take. It's just what you're referring to the scientific community and the way they prove or disprove theories or work out
Depends on your
theories.
definition.
It's a very vague term.
If I ask you the
There is no
question,
scientific method that just
when did
involves
the
following
Allies
one
victorious
path,
over
one
the
process. Whereas your Quranic method is one process. It's not this exact process.
I don't get there is actually one path.
His dates
With the scientific
are- the
method,
first part.
you one scientist puts forward a theory.
Yes, there is, but it's not a defined process.
It is a defined
It's
process.
not laid out in the book.
It is laid out.
You don't have to do it.
Yes, you do have to do
It's
it.
soon, and that's where it comes into.
There is
I don't actually, I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
No, there is
the
a
way I
scientific-
see the scientific method is just a term used to apply to science.
a scientific.
Whereas the Quranic method is there is a book that
I
tells you this is how you
suspect
do
that
it.
First of all, the scientific method itself has undergone some kind
I'd
of
like to
evolution,
find an Arabic
right?
dictionary before.
That's the first point. I mean,
Muhammad, see
in
what
the-
Sue.
I mean, you're arguing with someone who's actually quite ignorant about
It's
this.
No, that's fine. Look, I mean, I don't think you're an ignorant person.
I'm not a strong opponent.
This person is also. I'm not saying that you're not my opponent.
Okay.
What happened was that
Let's not
Debating
make-
apart.
Yeah, you're just a friend, right? Or you're just someone that I'm having a conversation with here in the park. It's not raining, so it's a good day. Yeah, for London. So I'm just telling you that this is. Can you see that? I'm not saying here be Muslim, therefore be Muslim. Although if you wanted to be, now you have proof. I'm just saying to you, at least see where I'm coming from.
I do see where you're coming
we
from.
go
Yeah.
into all this detail.
Yeah. So when atheists, I'm not saying that you're one of them. You didn't tell me you're an atheist, but I'm just assuming non-religious people. They say that religious people, they believe in faith, and they really like. I would say they caricature this thing philosophically in quite an embarrassing way. It's an embarrassing way of caricaturing. You're saying that we only believe, we believe in science and mathematics as if this is free from any speculation, and religious people believe in, faith, making it irrational, illogical. It's embarrassing because the word proof or evidence is. It means a body of evidence means a body of proof. Yeah?
within 9 years.
Now, the body of proof that the Muslim is presenting might not be to the standard of the atheist. But the atheists have to realize that when they are saying that thing, they have to apply their very same standards to their own, to the things that they believe in. Rationalism, mathematics, science, etc. Nothing can be absolutely proven. Everything can be absolutely criticized philosophically. But we work probabilistically. So if something works to a degree of 99% probabilistically, or 80% or 90%, me and you as reasonable people might come and say, you know what, that's enough. I believe this thing. And I'm certain of it. Do you see what I mean? And that's how we operate. And that's why, by the way, it makes sense for, like, that's how I operate. I mean, I look at all of these things and I think, okay, well, therefore it's most likely that the Quran is true. Therefore it's most likely. And I'm just giving you one example. I can stand here genuinely and speak for giving you example after example.
Were there any examples where the predictions were wrong?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. There isn't. This is finding a contradiction challenge. There isn't.
Has it ever been amended or edited?
No, that's the point. Some predictions are talking about things that are going to happen today, in today's world. The Prophet Muhammad said in the hadith.
Give some modern predictions.
I'll give you a couple of modern predictions for the people.
Any sort of future predictions?
I'll give you some modern predictions that relate to today's world, and that cannot be, by the way.
Something
They're not vague.
something as specific as the Roman.
Okay, let's do that. In a hadith narrated by Tirmidhi, which is a Sahih hadith. Hadith scholar including Al-Albani.
No, that's so brilliant.
Muhammad said there will come a time where people will be walking around in Arabic يعزف على رؤوسهم بالمعازف. That's exactly what it says. يعزف على رؤوسهم بالمعازف. That on their heads, musical instruments will be playing on their heads. Now, if I try to really struggle with this myself, I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm a Muslim, yeah? I'm thinking to myself, musical instruments are known. You've got the saxophone, you've got the flute, you've got these things, yeah? If the Prophet is telling us to, and this is one of the end time results things, there's going to come a time where there's going to be musical instruments playing on your head. I'm asking the question really, how does that take effect ritualistically? Is there a saxophone that you put on top of your head? Or is there some kind of flute that you play into my ear? On the head. It says on the head. So the question is, what is this referring to? Today is easy. Just say it's talking about headphones. Easy.
And that's in the original.
It's not the Quran, it's the hadith. So hadith, we believe that Muhammad yes, but we believe that the Quran, so we as Muslims believe in two texts. The Quran, which we believe is divine in the word of God, and the hadith, which we believe has been revealed to Muhammad through God, the angel Gabriel from God. So it's information. I'll give you another example, which is a Sahih hadith as well, narrated in more than one text. And it says that there will be a time, listen to this incredible hadith. It's actually in two different wordings. One of them is saying, there will be a time that people will ride yarkabuna, and then this suruj. Now this word suruj comes from the Arabic word sarj, which by the way they didn't know what it means. Yeah? This suruj, the Prophet tells us what it's like. So what is suruj? I'm not going to translate it directly. Suruj, he says it's like rihal. Rihal, if you look into the old books, the old dictionaries of the time of the Prophet, not today's ones, because they can easily be changed. The old books, they tell us it's basically like a ship. Some describe it as something with 4 walls around it, but the Prophet gives us more information. These suruj, according to the classical dictionaries, have leather inside it. Leather interiors, jild. Yeah? These leather interiors, according to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that they will be riding in these.
So he predicted luxury cars.
I'm going to tell you some more things which are going to make you think about it. But they'll be riding, and they'll be, and this is talking about Muslims. Muslims will stop these vehicles at the doors, on the doors of the masajid, and then there will be some women that come out of it. And what is the description of the women? The aliyat kasiyat. They are dressed and naked at the same time, meaning that they're wearing very tight clothes. And he tells us what kind of fashion they're going to have. They're going to have this kind of fashion of this kind of camel, which is kind of like it's got hair like this hat. You get it? So either it means that they put top of their head in the hijab, like the headscarf, like that, or it means that they put in their hair on. You get it? So
I've been trying to get escape for determinist.
hot women will come to a sports car at some point in the future.
something like that, yes. What do you think?
Because it's relatively new.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is a hadith. This is a hadith narrated by Umar ibn Khattab in Sahih Muslim, which is the second or most authoritative hadith book in Islam. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the barefooted shepherds, they're going to yatatawaluna fil bunyan. They're going to barefooted shepherds means Arabs. Bedouin Arabs that have got no shoes on, basically.
So in other words,
They're going to compete in the tall buildings. Now, where are the tallest buildings in the world?
it's sort of
No, it's Burj Khalifa. Right. And who's the one who made that? If you look at these guys with their dress code, they're Arabs, they probably wear sandals or probably not even wear shoes at all. And look at Dubai, how it was 15 years ago. This is clear. I think this is very clear. Do you know what I mean? If people are telling us, you know,
Sorry, the prediction being barefooted.
non-reductive.
Arabs in particular, Bedouins, they're going to build. No, they're going to race with one another in the construction of high buildings. That's exactly what yatatawaluna fil bunyan means. They're going to try and create something taller. The other one's going to come and say, no, I'm going to create this one taller.
Basically, when you see something that's happened, it's easy to interpret a prediction according to how things have unfolded. So, for example, if the Middle East had that explosion in tall buildings, you could apply some other interpretation to it.
Because we're imposing an hierarchy.
So, to me, somebody who doesn't really have any commitment to any faith,
Because our
to me they're just pretty vague, loose words that could be applied to perhaps any evolution of many things.
The word burj is clear in Arabic. It just means building or a structure, right? The word tatawalun means to grow something or to make something taller. Tawil is someone who's tall like myself. Okay? So basically it's saying that you're going to make something taller, the other one's going to make it taller, and then they're going to compete with one another in that way. You get it? So I'm just saying that this is clear text. This is clear text. And sometimes in Arabic, I'll be honest with you, there's some words that can have more than one meaning. This is not the case of it.
So what do you make then of, for example, because Nostradamus made many predictions which came true again in fairly loose, unconvincing language, but again, because of how the future unfolded, they became applicable. Does that therefore mean that Nostradamus therefore requires some form of religious status?
These things will inevitably turn out to be
That's
true.
right.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you've got
Over
to,
time, anything can turn out to be true.
if that was true,
Multiverse, if you have infinity, at some point you'll have Shakespeare's works.
nowadays you have gambling shops. I hope you don't use them. But you know, William Hill or something like that. If people could genuinely tell the future, they put all their money onto, you know, whatever it is that wins the game. You know what I mean? I don't know how to say it. You put all my money on black, 100% this is going to happen. Then look away. It's not like that. Life is. That's why probability is incredibly handy. So I'm giving you 3 examples.
So he starts.
I'll give you a 4th one.
What he calls the
Prophet
core.
Muhammad said that in the future, I'm talking about today, today's world, not like, because he said that you're going to go into Egypt. He said you're going to, basically, you're going to dominate Egypt. You're going to be in charge of Egypt. You're going to be in charge of, you know, he's going to be in charge of Yemen. That Islam will spread to Pakistan. That Islam will spread to India. Pakistan, as Sindh. In Arabic, it's called as Sindh.
It didn't exist then, did it, of course?
Yeah, of course not. The region where Pakistan is called as Sindh. So as Sindh was referred to in the Hadith, according to Abu Hurairah's Hadith. And Al-Hind is India, no doubt. Yeah? Hind means India.
There aren't any sort of.
And that's narrated in a reliable Hadith that Islam will spread to that location. It's mentioned that in the Hadith that you're going to you're going to fight the Turkish people. Clearly that happened, and that's why the Turkish Ottoman Empire became one of the strongest empires actually in the whole the world's history, and the longest reigning empire I think ever.
And the most brutal.
And probably the most brutal as well.
The nurse standing next to your mother has more electromagnetic gravitation effects on anything
If you want some reference,
at the time you're born.
Sorry, I'm going to...
thank you very much.
And he takes that fairly hard.
Cheers, Ben.
Cheers, see you later.